Okay, look, I think we'll get started, everyone. Thank you so much for your time today, and welcome to today's session on leveraging the SME Advantage to find and retain talent, how you can advise your clients in challenging and changing times. So we're using Zoom today, and we obviously encourage you to ask questions. You can do so via the Q&A button in your Zoom window. And just so you know, we will answer them all at the end unless there's something incredibly topical or important that comes up. My name is Charles Clark. I'm the Marketing Director of BOMA. And for anyone who doesn't know about BOMA, we're a digital marketing communications platform for accountants with a library full of ready-to-share content for emails, social posts, and website blogs. And one of our key content partners is MyHR, who's been putting fantastic HR-focused content into our library for the past couple of years. Now, today we're very fortunate to be joined by Sylvie Thrush-Marsh. She's MyHR's Chief Evangelist. I really wish I had a title like that. That's quite something. And Sylvie is a really experienced and award-winning senior HR generalist, and she's got capabilities across all HR disciplines. She's worked across businesses from startups to corporates and brings a wealth of practical people and process experience to her work, and so is the ideal person to talk to today about a critical issue facing all SMEs, that of retaining or recruiting and retaining staff. So Sylvie, thanks so much for joining us today. And look, I'll hand over to you now, and I'll listen with interest as a small business as well.
Perfect. Kia ora, Charles. Thank you for that introduction. Kia ora koutou, ko Sylvie tōku ingoa. As Charles has very generously introduced me, I'm the Chief Evangelist at MyHR. Accountants and HR folk don't always hang out in many of the same spaces, so it's a real delight and pleasure to be here presenting to you today to support you in advising your own clients and issues that may come up to your awareness or that may come up in your discussions with them that potentially is something you wouldn't always be talking to or wouldn't always be across, but certainly giving you some tools and some points of discussion to inform the conversations that you're having with them. We know that accountants are incredibly highly placed in positions of trust and credibility with your clients. And part of that credibility and trust comes from, of course, the fantastic work that you do with your clients on the accounting side of things. What we're intending and hoping to do today is to give you some tools or thoughts or things to share that when you end up having these conversations with your businesses around challenges they're facing and ways that you can be supportive, you have a few more tools in your toolkit to have informed and useful discussions with your clients. So let's click through into today's agenda. So first of all, of course, is a bit of a who's my HR slide that I need to go through. My marketing team would tell me off. But we'll move very quickly into a short discussion of the headwinds that we're facing in the New Zealand economy at the moment, particularly on the employee and labour side of things. I'll talk a little bit about who small and medium-sized enterprises are so that it's clear sort of who we're talking about and where this information is helpful. We'll talk about why SMEs are the best with quite a hefty dose of bias, because they're certainly my favourite client to work with. And then finally, we'll talk around understanding the employee value proposition of a business, what the employee value proposition is, and we'll connect that back to, of course, the conversation we've been having around SMEs and where we can outcompete corporates for talent and for skills. So who's MyHR and why am I here speaking to you? We were established in 2013, so this year is our 10th birthday. We're very excited. We've got a big party coming up in July. And our mission and purpose is to make HR easy for businesses. We're outsourced HR that covers all employment matters. So all of the proactive, supportive stuff from performance reviews and development and onboarding through to employment relations and disciplinary management and some of the gnarlier stuff. So what's different about what MyHR does is we combine expert HR support with smart HR software. So unlike having an in-house HR resource or a consultant or an advocate that you trust and work with, we also have a platform that stores and manages all of your HR information and helps streamline HR processes and practices to make HR easy for your business. Unlike products or offerings that are just a software though, we back our software and our tech stack with a bunch of humans like me who are there to guide you and your managers through tricky people issues, to advise you on what it means when a new public holiday is introduced, to have a conversation around what fair pay agreements might mean for your business. So we're the full package of expert HR support with smart HR software. We have been going for 10 years, like I mentioned, and we now support over 1,300 Kiwi and Australian businesses. Our headquarters are in Auckland. We have offices in Christchurch, Queenstown, and Sydney as well. So we've seen a lot, right? So if you can imagine businesses from 1 employee all the way up to 750 employees, we have the privilege of supporting Hal Pizza and Resine and many of the sporting industries in New Zealand with their HR requirements. There's not a lot we haven't seen, which means that we can very confidently say that we deliver an excellent service and an excellent product to our customers. We have a 96% client retention rate with no lock-in contracts. The onus is on us to provide an amazing service. So if this is something that you have been thinking about for your own business, or a need that you know that your clients have yourself around getting some support with HR, with compliance, with process, with people management, please get in touch. It would be cool to have a conversation with you to see how we can help. So sales pitch over. Let's get into the meat of what it is that we're here to talk about today. So the challenges that SMEs are facing are not unique to small and medium businesses, but the headwinds affect the whole economy and the whole market that we're all competing in for talent. So I wanted to go through a couple of pieces of information here which will inform the context around why we need to be thinking smarter and slightly differently around how we keep and retain talent in our businesses for our clients. So we know that we have low immigration numbers, right? So with the pandemic, with the borders closing for long and unpredictable stretches of time, the numbers at the moment are quite stark compared to where they have been before. So we had a net human gain of 15,800 in 2022, compared to pretty much a net loss of the same numbers in 2021. So we had the same number of people in New Zealand from immigration as we did from 2020 to 2023. Those numbers evened out over 22 and 2021. To give you a sense of the scale of the change, pre-pandemic, the average number of migrants or the average number of kind of gain that we had was 57,000 people a year from 2014 to 2019. So what that means is there are just physically fewer warm bodies in the country to do the work that we need them to be doing, to be recruiting from, to be hiring from, to engage as temporary or contract resources. There are just physically fewer people around, and that's a dynamic that New Zealand is not used to after several years of growth through immigration. I'm speaking to accountants. It will come as no surprise, of course, that we have been facing increasing labour costs over the last few years. So between 2017 and 2023, the minimum wage increased 44%. It's not always a one-for-one rising tide lifts all boats effect on higher salaries, but we know that the floor for labour and the cost to businesses are rising across the spectrum. The ANZ Business Sentiment or Business Outlook survey, I think they call it, shows that 87% of businesses are expecting to raise wages over the next 12 months. And that's across a range of industries. It's not just businesses that tend to pay minimum wage. So we have fewer people around to do work. We know that it's costing us more to pay them to do things. And we're also facing some demographic changes that are not as acute in terms of pressure as these other two are, but certainly will inform discussions and choices that we have over the next few years as we look to resource our businesses and support our clients going forward. So at the moment, the ratio of workers aged 65 and over to workers aged 65 and under is 4:1. So for every 4 workers who are younger than 65, there is 1 worker who is over 65, so 20% of the workforce. In 20 years, as our population ages and as our birth rates drop off, in 2043, for every 2 workers aged under 65, there will be 1 aged over 65. So this is important when we're thinking about upskilling and finding talent in places we might not look for it. It also, of course, is putting an enormous load on the tax base of the country to fund the superannuation for people who are claiming it in a 65 and over. It's not an acute challenge today, but something to be mindful of as we think about sharpening our toolkit and getting better at supporting our clients to find talent and find skills in places that maybe they otherwise wouldn't be looking. And of course, no conversation in 2022 or 2023 would be complete without a mention of the cost of living. So the Consumer Price Index increased from March 2022 to March 2023 by 6.7%. The last time I spoke on this topic and I was comparing the December 2021 to December 2022 figures, I think it was a 7.2% increase. So the pace of increase is slowing, but we're certainly not seeing any reduction in common consumer goods. So fewer people to do the work, more expensive to get them to do things, an aging population that will play out over the next 20 years, and an environment where it is costing us more to get around. This is not intended to be a doom and gloom conversation by any means, but certainly it's really worthwhile starting to think about how your clients might be dealing successfully or perhaps not so successfully with these challenges, and where having a better grasp of some of the tools and ways that we can influence talent and skilled people to stay in our businesses and to find them will serve your clients really well, particularly at this moment in time. So when we talk about small and medium businesses, let's clarify what we mean, because being specific is important in this discussion. So small and medium enterprise, some people say SMEs, some people say SMEs, it's the same thing. And in every jurisdiction that I'm aware of, they're classed as businesses that employ 20 or fewer people. So New Zealand, Australia, I know in the UK and the US, it's very much the same. And in New Zealand, what that means is, or what that looks like, is 95% of our businesses are small businesses. They have fewer than 20 employees. Fewer than 20 employees, small businesses do make up the majority of businesses in all of those jurisdictions I mentioned. The ratios change a little bit, but most of the time, most businesses are small, which doesn't pan out in terms of, or I guess sort of logically does make sense, that the amount of employment that they contribute is proportionately smaller. So only 29.3% of employees in New Zealand are employed by small businesses. So the 3% of businesses who are bigger than 20 employ more than 70% of our workforce. So it's good to be aware of what we are talking about when we talk about small businesses, because it feels very different to work in a small business than it does to work in a medium one. So a medium-sized business, unfortunately, isn't as conveniently defined by our government agencies or by other parties. The way that we tend to think about a medium business is anything from about 20 employees up to about 200. So some of the characteristics are they typically don't have HR resources in-house. There might be a consultant who's around. Maybe one of the directors was a lawyer, or there's a consultant who comes in sometimes, but they tend not to have in-house HR resource. It's too expensive. It's really hard to justify, particularly in this climate, when you only have 200 employees. So typically as well, the founders and or owners of the business are still actively involved in some way. They might be, in the business full time. They might be in the business 3 days a week. They might be around kind of in an advisory capacity, but they're typically still active participants and they show up in the business and they're doing things. And lastly, what's clear about both small and medium-sized businesses is that there are fewer layers of authority and governance and sign-off to get things done. If you've ever worked for a larger business or a corporation, and if you have, my commiserations, there's so many decision makers and quality checkpoints to go through because you're managing this much larger population of employees. It takes longer to get things done and you have to go through more layers to get sign off. That becomes important because it means that larger businesses can't move as quickly as smaller and medium-sized ones, which is a key point around this SME advantage that I keep mentioning. Moving quickly is the point. We don't have to be getting the remuneration committee to sign off on something that then has to go to, finance to sign off, that then has to go to our equity panel to make sure it's going to be inclusive and not disadvantage anyone. None of those panels or decision points are wrong, but what it does mean is they take time, they slow down the process. There are certainly more stakeholders to be involved. So before we kick into the SME Advantage, I wanted to draw your attention to a couple of things which can be a useful lens for using when you're hearing your clients talk about frustrations with their team or trying to understand how they can recruit quicker and recruit better or keep people in their business for longer. So Hertzberg was a fellow who in 1964, so nearly 60 odd years ago, came up with this theory around motivation in the workplace. So it's an oldie but a goodie. There are clearly some elements that have been modernized, but as a principle for thinking about how we engage our staff and how we motivate them, there's still quite a lot of value to add here. So the two-factor theory talks about hygiene factors and motivation factors, and having good hygiene factors gives you a different outcome than having good motivation factors, and I'll explain why. So your hygiene factors are basically your table stakes. It's everything that when it is going well, you don't notice is going well because you kind of expect it to be taken care of. So if you're in an office that has functioning air conditioning, if you're in an office that is vacuumed twice a week, if your laptop works and can connect to the internet effectively, if your Wi-Fi is of the quality that you need to do your job, if you are paid on time, if your boss is friendly and not a dickhead, none of that is going to win you the Nobel Prize for amazing working conditions, but not having them in place will lead to dissatisfied employees. If your workplace is moldy and smelly, if there's a leak in the ceiling every time it rains, if your pay is consistently a day wrong, or you're missing 50 or 60 bucks here and there, if your boss is a bit standoffish, not that easy to talk to, all of those things mean that you will be dissatisfied with your job. But getting them right doesn't result in kind of corresponding good feelings. You just sort of don't notice. One of the kind of mental tricks that I use to think about hygiene factors is no one's going to compliment me for being showered, clean, having brushed my teeth, and wearing clean clothes to work, right? If my personal hygiene is acceptable, the outcome is that no one notices. But if I was smelly and had greasy hair and I smelled of BO and I had grubby fingernails and I had mud on my shoes all the time, people would notice because I'm dropping below kind of that accepted threshold. So pay is a hygiene factor. And this is something that is surprising to a lot of us who potentially have learned a lot of our management skills on the tools in the workplace, that if people feel like they are underpaid, they are dissatisfied. They will be unhappy. They will look for other jobs. They will kick up a stink. They will behave badly. But if people are paid adequately, or if they're paid to a level that they think, fairly represents their experience and the value that they bring, they don't feel super satisfied and gung-ho and committed to going above and beyond. It just kind of vanishes into the background as something they don't need to be aware of. So the motivation factors then are things that do motivate us, that if we get them right, bring a sense of connection, a sense of energy, a sense of drive to what it is that we do. And they're all things that small businesses can do really, really well. So feeling recognized for what you've contributed to a project or a discussion or to your business, being able to achieve things that matter to you, or being able to kind of point to the impact that your work has had, having a sense of responsibility and ownership over what you're doing, chances for promotion, kind of interesting work or opportunities for growth. All of this stuff will motivate employees. If it's not there, they won't be demotivated most of the time, but having them there is exciting and is chewy and kind of gives employees something to care about. So the reason I point this out is that pay is something that is really hard traditionally for small businesses to compete on. We don't have the same margins. We don't have the same resilience to fluctuations in the economy that larger corporates do, but your clients are likely to have many, many more tools in their toolkit on the motivation side to motivate employees, to bring people into the business and to give them a sense of meaning and connection at work. So hygiene factors, if you get them wrong, people are grumpy. Pay is one of those. Motivation factors are things that if you get right, people feel connected, engaged, they're satisfied with their job, they're likely to stick around longer and to work harder for you. So that leads us to talking about these advantages and how they play out when we're thinking about how we can advise our clients to provide meaningful work to their employees, hire quicker and hire smarter. So by definition, SME businesses are smaller and connected, right? We know that it's really easy to know kind of what's going on in your team or in your business when there's 14 of you, when there's 20 of you, compared to when there's, even 80 or let alone getting into 300 or 400. So businesses that are smaller can be much more connected to their teams and much more connected to their people, which means you have a better understanding of the levers that you can pull to retain and to support your teams. So when having conversation with your clients, or when you're hearing clients talk about the difficulties that they have, it may be worth paying attention to the internal factors that drive resignations. So a SEEK survey from, it was either last year or 2021, said that of the internal factors that drive resignations, working conditions and environment affects more than half of them. That's a motivating factor for more than half of employees to leave when we're thinking about reasons that they may choose to go. Organizational changes and or restructures account for nearly 40% of those departures. And I think that should probably say poor management and leadership or ineffective management and leadership in the business is just under a third of reasons that employees will leave. So all of those things are not to do with pay, right? And they're not to do with size. Those are factors that you can support your clients to understand and influence and do a better job of, and take advantage of their size and ability to connect with their team. If this isn't resonating, or if they aren't clear why they have high churn rates or why they're finding it hard to hire, encourage them to get curious. Just have a chat with a few people. You don't even need to have, something like a survey or a Google form or anything near as sophisticated. Just have some chats, have conversations with your team to understand what is going on for them. Sometimes that might be more appropriate, in one-on-ones or in a group situation, depending on the context. But take advantage of your closeness and connection with your team to understand what is going on for your people, remembering that the things that are most likely to be affecting their decision to go are going to be things that you have control over, like working conditions, organizational changes, and the quality of leadership and management in the business. A qualifying point here. So understanding doesn't have to mean capitulation, right? So if we understand that our team would like more time with their leaders in one-on-ones, if your clients discover that they have been managing or dealing with some working conditions that aren't ideal, if they agree that the change or response to that frustration is reasonable, awesome, they can go ahead. There are always going to be pieces of feedback or employees or people we work with who we don't agree with, right? So people who are very entitled and want the world for the bare minimum of effort. People who have unrealistic expectations about potentially the salaries that they can expect as employees of smaller businesses. Understanding doesn't have to mean agreement, but you can't act or you can't change the way that your business is doing something, and you can't, help your clients in this space without them having an understanding of the landscape and the area that they're playing in. So the second SME advantage is that smaller businesses can move quickly and precisely to respond to challenges, particularly in the people space. Now, earlier I flagged and described, a corporate who, if they wanted to make changes to, their remuneration plan, or if they wanted to give a bonus as a one-off to someone who really smashed it that year, they will have many, many layers of sign-off and decision-making points to go through. Smaller businesses don't have to do that. Often the owner of the business is still involved and is still the decision maker around a bunch of this kind of stuff. Or if there's a team lead in a business of 15 or 20 or 30 people, they're only one layer away from the person who can sign off on this. So when you understand what it is that your people are looking for, respond quickly and with tailored support. You don't have to wait for a survey to come back. You don't have to have 12 weeks of consultation. You can move much more quickly. So examples of changes that you may suggest that your clients think about making if they're dealing with people in their team or with people in their business who need some support. Additional KiwiSaver instead of a pay rise. If they've got someone who is thinking about buying their first home, or maybe even someone who's just thinking about retirement, it may be more meaningful to them to get an extra contribution to their KiwiSaver, which is money that they know they can't touch except for certain circumstances, than to get a pay rise. You don't need anyone's permission to do that. You can just agree it with them, and if it's something they're keen on, you can offer that. Flexible working arrangements are a characteristic almost of small businesses, especially with the forced involuntary acceleration of our digital capabilities over COVID and the pandemic. If you have members of your team who would love to do 2 days a week from home because they've got faith commitments, or they've got caring commitments that they want to manage, or they've just bought a house that they freaking love and just want to be in it 2 days a week because the sun coming in the morning is amazing, you can agree that with them. Make sure it's safe, make sure they've got the equipment they need, but you can just agree that with people or with their entire business if you want to. Have a think about creative ways to reward your employees. So this is particularly true of more retail or hospitality environments. We have a client who recognized that they're a kind of a boutique high-end sort of restaurant and bar, and they decided that they could afford to set aside a certain amount of the profits from their takings every night to be shared equally among everyone who worked that evening. So they ran the math and decided they could do that. If they don't make a profit, there's no money to share out. But it means that their team know that if they work collaboratively, they smash it, they do an amazing job. At the end of every shift or the end of every 24-hour period, there is a pot of money set aside for them to pay out and recognize that they contributed to the success of the restaurant that day. That's obviously not going to work for anyone, for everyone, but we know, because we have their people data, have extraordinarily low turnover in an industry that is renowned for high churn and for high employee movement. So getting creative with ways that you might set up your remuneration schemes is something else you can support your clients to do here. Generous parental leave. So MyHR, eats our own dog food and responds quickly and precisely to employee needs. The policy that we have for anyone who takes parental leave is you just tell us what you want and we'll make it work. Do you want to take 6 months off and come back and work part-time? Awesome, let's do that. Do you want to take 1.5 years off and we'll see you in 18 months? Amazing, that's totally cool. Do you want to come in and do your keeping in touch days? Do you want to use them or not? There's all kinds of ways you can split those arrangements to support your staff in ways that potentially large corporates would struggle to because of their size. Things like gym and study allowances. Again, you don't have to go through remuneration committee after remuneration committee to decide to offer this to someone. If you have one of your team who is desperate to finish their qualification that they never got a chance to, and you're in a position to financially contribute to that, how much cooler is it going to feel for them to be supported by their employer rather than feeling like they have to, fund it out of their own pocket at a time when the cost of living is really biting? So all of these are examples of kind of tailored, flexible responses you might make to your team or to your employees that you and your own businesses may find helpful. But when you're speaking with your clients around what it is that they would need to support their own client as their own team, here are some examples of suggestions you might table. So I'm taking slightly longer than I had expected, so I'll move through this a bit more quickly. Your employee value proposition is your EVP, and it is the answer to the question, why would someone choose to work for this business instead of for their competitor? So for your clients, if you have conversations with them around churn, around cost of recruitment, around all this kind of stuff, make sure they really understand the story that they are telling to people when they are recruiting them and that they are living when they have people in their business who they want to retain. So yes, part of this is around pay. If you're paying under market, you're going to need to work a lot harder and a bunch of other points to make up for it. But it's also around the impact of your work. Do you have a client who works in a not-for-profit space and does amazing work with disadvantaged children or with a particular healthcare kind of group? That's amazing. The fact that their employees can make an impact is really meaningful to us. Is there a client of yours who has the coolest team vibe and culture? I'm not just talking, pinball machines and air hockey and beanbags, but is there a real sense of community and ownership and collaboration there? That's a part of the answer to the question, why would someone choose to work for your client and not for a competitor? Do they have amazing development opportunities? Are there perhaps senior, very technically experienced members of their team who act as mentors and trainers to the junior members of the team? It doesn't have to be a full-blown corporate development program to be meaningful. If there is a really genuine chance for people to develop their skills and their competencies working for one of your clients, that's totally something they should be singing about and should be talking about very openly. Are they working on really interesting projects or work that perhaps no one else could get because they're doing very, very niche R&D, or they're working in a really difficult to break into segment of the market? That counts. I don't want to work somewhere where my job day to day is boring. That would be awful. So if your clients have work and tasks that are interesting, that's a part of your EVP too as well. And then lastly, the lifestyle factor. So do they offer remote working? Is there a chance to work flexible hours? Can they take, long overseas trips and kind of work asynchronously with the rest of their team? If they can offer working styles or practices or chances that support a healthy lifestyle, or a lifestyle that's meaningful in different ways to different people, that's totally a part of the EVP as well. So last slide from me. What we thought would be really helpful is providing you with some examples of situations where these conversations come up, so that you're listening for comments or discussions or observing patterns in the accounts of your clients where there is an opportunity for you to tap in and go, hey, have you thought about this? Or I went to a webinar the other day and it really made me think about how you might be tackling your difficulty with recruiting. So the first example, and the most obvious, is that your client complains about the difficulty finding staff. If you're having someone have a whinge to you because, again, you're a trusted, capable advisor to them and they want to, just let off some steam or engage with you, that this is kind of the primary signal that something's going wrong and they might need some support. If you observe that their spending on recruitment consultants has increased because they can no longer just in market or within their own networks find people to come and work for them, they're having to go and pay, 18, 20, 25% of someone's salary to get the staff that they need. That's a signal that they may need to rethink their approach to recruiting and bringing people into the business. This one can be a bit of a double-edged sword. If you see that wage and salary spending is increasing a lot, that may be a signal that they're having to pay heaps to compensate for more attractive offers elsewhere, or that they aren't telling the story around why it's amazing to work there for other reasons. Or on the other hand, if you can see that wage and salary spending isn't moving at all, that's a sign that that business is probably not responding as quickly or proactively as they need to the fact that there is a real rising tide of wages at the moment, and that there is a real rising tide of the cost of living at the moment. So spending too much, that's a signal they might need to do some thinking. Spending not enough, they probably aren't responding to what's happening in the context as they need to. If you can see that they have high employee turnover, or if they've got really short tenure in roles, perhaps because you keep hearing, different names mentioned, or the business owner is having a hard time getting to you because they're constantly recruiting and onboarding, again, that's a signal that something isn't going right. Either they are recruiting people who are not a good fit for the job and for their business, so they need to look at their recruitment practices, or once they arrive, they maybe don't have their hygiene factors quite right. Maybe there are basics they can pay attention to, or potentially the people they're bringing into the business were sold a different story, or they were sold a different understanding of what it would be like to work here, in which case there are plenty of things in there that the business can respond to. Or if you're seeing an increased spending on temporary and contract labour. So in any situation where it's hard to find permanent staff, whether that's because you can't recruit them or they keep, pissing off and leaving, an increased spending on temporary and contract labour is an indication that there is something not quite right with the staffing there. So that could be a cue for you to have a conversation with your client to understand what else might be going on there. And then finally, if it's taking your client a long time to fill vacancies, so they're having someone leave and it takes them, months and months to find someone to replace them, again, potentially they're recruiting and looking in the wrong areas or the wrong pools, or potentially they are not telling a story around why it's fabulous to work there. That's something that they can certainly work on and pay some attention to as well. Thinking about the whole employee value proposition, the whole EVP, and making it clear why someone would choose to work for them as opposed to working for someone else. So I will hand over to the wonderful Liz to take us through the BOMA platform, and I'll be jumping in and adding some comments here and there as well. But Liz, all over to you.
Thank you. Now I need to share screen, and I think I just need access from you to do that. Not happening at the moment, but here we go.
I've just given you permission, Liz. Is that working now?
Thank you. Yeah. I think it is. Hopefully you can see that screen.
I might need to stop my share. Bear with me a moment. Cool. Try sharing now, Liz. We'll see if that comes up.
Sorry, team. Hopefully you can see that.
Yeah, that's coming through now. Nice one.
Perfect. So thanks so much, Sylvie. In this part of the webinar, we're going to very briefly show you how you can start the conversation with your small business clients and support them using MyHR content in BOMA. If you're not familiar with BOMA, we are a digital marketing platform built specifically for accountants and business advisors. Within the platform, you can create emails, social media updates, branded web pages to host a blog, and you can create lead forms to capture emails for newsletters or in a lead generation campaign. The thing that makes BOMA different is the content, and you can see the most recent content here on the dashboard. Let's take a look in the content library. So BOMA's content library contains hundreds of articles, including content from MyHR. They are specific to your region and updated weekly. My account is currently set to New Zealand, but if you're in Australia, you will see Australian content, and specifically right now, a lot of content around the federal budget, but not yet in New Zealand. The budget announced this week, so you'll see that soon in New Zealand. The articles are written in your voice, but they're also fully customizable. You can search using a search term such as cash flow, or using the global categories such as tax. Let's look at people or HR, and we'll go into publishers and see the MyHR content. So when you have a BOMA subscription, you can access this content for free. There is some premium content in BOMA as well, but we're going to look at this content first. And we're going to start with just looking at an article. Each article comes with a high quality image for your social post and also header for your email. The social post is written for you. You can change this, you can change the image, and the longer form content you can also customize for your email. And this one is about remuneration, how to review it, pay people effectively, and understand pay parity. So Sylvie, I might bring you back in here to look at a couple of other articles. So let's start with leveraging the SME Advantage, obviously the topic of this webinar. And this has tips on small business, on how your small business clients can play to their strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. And the purpose of the content is to help your clients understand exactly what we've been talking about today, that employees care about more than just their pay packet. There are those motivation factors at play here, and gives them the tools to start thinking about their recruitment and retention challenges creatively with a slightly different lens.
Awesome. So that's a great one to start that conversation, get people to get in touch with you and have that advisory session with you. Another one, why employee actually, let's start with, before we do onboarding, let's look at recruitment, which comes first. So obviously a good topic for small businesses to put some time into recruitment processes for better hiring.
Yeah, absolutely. I was having a conversation with a client yesterday where I described recruitment as more of a dark art than a science, and she laughed and laughed and laughed because it can take time and effort to get right, and it can make or break your business. So any efforts and time that you spend here pays dividends further down the line.
Yeah, it's a good point. And then obviously following on from recruitment is onboarding, and again, a bit of time here is well worth it.
Yeah, exactly. Especially for clients who are currently recruiting, which is, likely to be many of them, but haven't started thinking about next steps and how they set their employee up for success. We know that good onboarding helps with engagement and retention, as well as setting that employee up to hit the ground running and start adding value and making good inroads from day one.
Awesome. And I think, so this article also links to the MyHR blog with lots of tips for your small business clients. And then one more I'm going to pull up. So following recruitment, onboarding, and then we've got retention is a nice sort of flow on to look at this article. So yeah, again, good tips for your small business clients. So let's look at how we would then send it using the BOMA platform. We'll start with that, leveraging the SME Advantage, and click deliver. Now you can choose to send this as an email, a social media update, or combine those in one campaign. However, I am going to select email, but I am going to show you at the end how to broaden your reach by adding social media channels later. Let's click start. And that takes us straight to the review and edit content stage. So first step is choose who you want to send that to. You can select those manually using the click boxes on the left-hand side. You could filter using tags. For example, you may have segmented your client base by employer. So you could use that as a tag or deliver to all, save and close. You can see that the email subject line and the preview description is written for you, and also the sender name. You can change all of these things in BOMA. So BOMA is making it super easy for you, but you can customize it and make it your own. So now we'll select the template. I'll select a branded template. Now, if I was sending this article on its own, I would choose the full article. BOMA just injects it into an email template, but I'm going to create a newsletter from some of those articles. So I will select the intro. And while that opens, when you set up your BOMA account, you simply upload your logo, and BOMA pulls the colors from that logo in order to create a really professional looking email template, which we can see here. So we can see the intro, the learn more takes us to the longer form article. You can change the text here. You can change the text on your button. So for example, how to attract top talent. I think it's always worthwhile telling people what they're clicking through to. So I'm going to change the language there. And then I want to create a newsletter. So let's go back into the Rows tab. Using the drop down, you can go back into the content library and choose another article. So let's choose the effective recruitment and simply drag and drop. Go back in. Now you don't need to choose content from the content library. You can write it yourself, and you can also paste in a website URL, and BOMA will pull the content from that web page, whether it's your blog or something you've read online, and create another intro for you that you can bring into your newsletter. So now we've got 3 articles, and we might want to add an introduction. Again, drag and drop. Let's change the language on here. If I was sending this as an email, I'd obviously want the first name, a greeting, but I'm going to remove that because I'm going to show you how I can, once I've created my newsletter, then share that newsletter on my social media channels. And that's obviously great to populate your newsletter, your social media channels, sorry, and also reach prospects and show people that you advise in this area as well. So when you're happy with your changes, and you'd probably want to add some text at the bottom as to how they can get in touch. Let's click preview, and I'll open it on mobile, and you can see you've got a beautiful newsletter created in seconds. Normally takes hours to create this sort of content, but with MyHR content and BOMA, it's done for you, and all you need to do is customize it. Save and close. Send yourself a test email to check you're happy with it, or to someone in the office, and then let's add our social channels. That will then turn on the social channels in my BOMA account that I have linked, so we can see what your LinkedIn business post will look like, what your tweet will look like, and the link in your post will link through to your newsletter page. When you're happy with all your social media and your email formatting, simply schedule. And you can either send it now or send for a specific time in the future, and schedule. Back in the dashboard, go to campaigns, and we will see that campaign that we've just created. You can also see other campaigns I've created in my BOMA account, where I've sent them: Facebook, LinkedIn Business, LinkedIn Personal, Twitter, and you will be able to go into each sent campaign to look at the engagement stats in social, such as clicks, shares, likes, etc., and across email, such as open rate, and see what's really working well with your audience. So we're delighted to be partnering with MyHR, the experts in people management, to bring you this content in BOMA. That was a very quick demo. You can organise a one-on-one demo in BOMA, but I'll pass back to Charles and Sylvie to explain how you can find out more about MyHR and BOMA.
Thanks so much, Liz.
So Charles, I'll stop sharing there.
Brilliant. So look, before we get to questions, and we do still have time, if Sylvie, I think you've got a couple of minutes left.
Yeah, I'm good for time, no concerns.
Fantastic. So look, if you do want to give BOMA a try, just come to bomamarketing.com. You can sign up for a free trial. You can see the pricing there per month for Australia and New Zealand. And obviously you can save if you move annual. Now we include onboarding and training with our plans. And as Liz said, if you did want to add Wolters Kluwer Premium Library to your account, you could just get in contact with us as well. Now, Sylvie, how should people learn about MyHR?
MyHR.works is the best place to go. You're welcome to sign up for a free trial to see what the platform looks like and have a bit of a play around to have a look at the features. As I mentioned earlier, we're a monthly subscription business, so we don't have any lock-in contracts. Prices for small businesses range from $250 a month plus gift to $450 a month for up to 20 employees. And for clients who come through the BOMA relationship, we have a 30% discount off our onboarding fee, which takes care of your health check and review of all of your HR policies and documents, setting all of your employees up in your account so that it's ready to go, and of course the training and integration with any of the other applications you use and support for your staff as they move across to using MyHR. So MyHR.works.
Fantastic. No, thanks everyone. If anyone has any questions, I know Sylvie is fantastic. Probably loads more that she can talk about. But if anyone does have any questions, do pop them into the Q&A box now. In the meantime, while we're waiting for anyone to do that, we will be sending out a recording of this. So feel free to share it with any colleagues or people in your business that you feel it would be useful for. Anyone have any questions? Sylvie, is there anything else just to add before we close up? Any sort of last bit of advice that you might a question that you're often asked that you think would be relevant for our listeners?
Yeah, the most common one that's coming up at the moment as we wrap up financial year and look to the end of financial years ending in June is certainly around managing pay conversations and how to have conversations around pay. It can be really confronting to have to tell someone that they aren't getting a pay rise, whether it's because they're a bit rubbish at their job and you haven't given them their feedback before, or whether the kind of economic circumstances and success of the business hasn't kind of given you enough margin to offer pay rises. That can be a really difficult conversation, and one that a lot of managers and business owners that I deal with really, really dread. There's a lot to do around, or there can be a lot of work to do around setting the landscape up so that that's a softer landing if you do have to have difficult conversations. Make sure people's understanding of their performance is accurate so that there aren't any surprises when they do ask you for an increase. Make sure you're sharing context with your team around if the business is smashing it and making tons of money, share that information. If the business is struggling, be clear around what's happening and what you're doing to address it. The kind of point of either of those pieces of communication, or all those practices, I should call them, is to make sure that there aren't any surprises when it does come to the end of the year and people are looking at their wages and wondering if they're going to get an increase. So don't avoid those chats. If you do have to have tough conversations, make sure that you're prepared for them, but make sure that today you does tomorrow you a favor by setting your team up with clear expectations around their own performance and how that is or isn't considered when it comes to pay increases. And also communicating regularly with your team around the headwinds that your business faces or the challenges that you're managing, so that they know what the full context is when it comes time to have conversations around pay.
Interesting. I think super relevant for accountants who, as we all know, are also small businesses, but also great advice to be able to pass on to clients as well. So there haven't been any questions. As we said before, obviously you can reach out to MyHR if you do have something else that comes up after you've jumped off. But I think for now we'll leave it there. Thanks, Liz, and thanks so much, Sylvie, for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for hosting me. I look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, Sylvie.
Nice one. Ka kite, everyone. See you soon.